Hey everybody, and welcome back. My name is Sue and I'm from OML Embroidery, and today I'm going to show you guys something that's really cool on my Luminaire 2. I had a quilt block that apparently I didn't finish, and for some reason I decided to cut it out. Look at that. So what I want to do is fix it, and I'm going to show you guys a really cool way of doing that. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I do actually have it done, is that I wanted to stitch the quilt block to the fabric behind. So I have full fabric and I have stabilizer behind it, and I just want to put like a running stitch so everything is holding on. So I picked from inside the Luminaire 2 just a square, and then I picked the camera and we're going to scan it, and I'm going to show you guys how fantastic this is. So that's all it was to scan, and look, now I have the picture, and it's a little hard for you guys to see. Maybe easier to use the buttons on the side for movement. I'm having a little bit of a hard time. I don't often use a stylus, but maybe at this precision work it would. So make it bigger, make it smaller. You can change the angle of it even by 1 degree to make sure that that single line of stitching fits around the square that you want. It's perfect for that. So you can kind of see the square there, right there. It's hard to see it otherwise. I do zoom in a bit later, but I'm just kind of lining it up and sizing it up. It does have red dots around the perimeter of the running stitch line for any of the frames that are built in on the Luminaire. So this is a fantastic feature, and I love this design. This is the Small Town Charm by Dime, and I called my store Kabloom, and I did some precision placement with the pumpkin, so I really wanted to keep this one. But like I said, for some reason, I cut it really close. Like, what was I thinking? There still has to be an awning, and I didn't finish it. So, you know, you can always rescue your designs if you want. So you could play around with this forever, but I'm just going to go ahead and stitch it now, and I'm going to stitch it in the black thread. And I'm a little bit off, but at this point it doesn't matter. So all I'm doing here is just keeping the quilt block attached to the white fabric on the back, and I use cutaway stabilizer, by the way. And look, I didn't do it too badly. This is my second time around. I'm not worrying about the little bit of fabric at the top showing through. I'm going to show you guys how to make this all better. So once it's done, now you can go ahead and change this to satin stitches and keep the placement. It'll work fine. But I had made one on my computer that left a little bit area out. If you look at the top left hand side, there's a plant with, you know, it has quite a bit of dense stitching, and I didn't want to put the satin stitches over it to cover it up, because this is supposed to be done, the satin stitches are supposed to be done before you do the rest of it. So I brought in my own design, which is simply just a satin stitch, and if you look right there, what I'm trying to do is make the little cutout fit perfectly in. Now you can zoom in and have a look. It's easier to use these buttons. If you see, I finally started doing that, but it's easier to use the buttons. You can make precision placement for it. So zoom in a little bit. You can zoom in a little bit more if you want. There we go. Look how great that is to see it like that. And it was so easy to do. I'm so happy with it. Now I'm not going to be stitching it out in yellow. I am going to be stitching it in black, so my messy stitches that I just did, it kind of looks not the greatest right now, but it will look fantastic. And it's easy to do, so you can save your designs. This is one of my favorite ones, if I didn't say that already. So what I'm doing is just messing around with the size, and I'm bringing it in from one side to another. I could probably play with this all day, just getting it perfect in one way or another, but at some point you just have to stitch it and it's gonna look great. So hopefully, am I ready? Yeah, I think I'm ready. Let's go stitching and we'll see how everything gets covered up and how good it looks. And you guys will be surprised at how fantastic it looks. So here we go for the stitching. And I'm quite impressed. Now, it's not 100% perfect because I am doing it after the fact, but it does actually turn out pretty good. So some nice zigzag stitches to hold everything down, and I just did, you know, the normal width for satin stitches that you would normally use, and it seemed to cover up everything really well. So look what it's doing right there. Look at that. You can't even see the edges of the applique. That looks exactly like it should. At this point, other than the plant that's kind of hanging over the side, you really wouldn't be able to tell that I did the satin stitches after. So super easy. Let's keep stitching. I'm going to speed it up a little bit so we can get to the end. Now right here though, before I do, right here you can see why I left a little gap there, because I really don't want the satin stitches stitching over it. There are a couple of black lines, but that's okay. This is kind of crooked as well, and I'm really actually hoping that the satin stitches bring it all together. So, okay, let's speed it up and let's see how it looks. Now that it's all done the underlay, it's doing the satin stitches. Nice close-up view. You can see the name of the store is Kabloom. I laughed so hard when my brain came up with that name. And aside from a little bit of the pink fabric showing through at the top, it's really made the edges nice and sharp. And I'm hoping, like I said, I'm hoping it's going to cover everything up. So there's a lot of things you could use this for. Basically, it's the camera that scans fabric or whatever's in your hoop. So if you had striped fabric, for example, and you wanted to line something up perfectly, then that's when you'd use the camera. There's also a projector, but I'll do more videos on that if you guys are interested in it. So basically, I think it took me about 10 minutes conservatively. I was messing around quite a bit, but it took me 10 minutes to save my quilt block, and I'm thinking it was kind of fun, and it was definitely worth it because this quilt block is awesome, and it looks terrible without the finishing on it. Now, once this gets done stitching, there's still one more step to do. So you can see the pretty white fabric. I just picked whatever fabric I had. I did, however, this is the 5x7 size, and I did put it in a slightly bigger hoop, so I'd have a little more room to play around with, because this fits really closely into the 5x7, and that just makes it a little more complicated. So I did spray it down, and I did my initial running stitches to hold it so nothing will move, almost like a basting stitch. I didn't do a basting stitch though. I did an actual running stitch right off of the machine, and I think I did a pretty good job. Now here and there you can see some rogue black lines that aren't quite perfectly in. But you know what? Don't sweat the small stuff. When this is put together and the awning's on, you aren't going to notice. It's one of those things where you see it and other people probably won't. So we always got to be aware of that. So it's really done a great job. I just love that camera. It's so awesome. And now we're done stitching it. So I have one more thing to do to finish my block. Look at, isn't that great? Isn't that great? The sides are all straight now, and the only thing that I didn't care for completely was the black line at the bottom. But as I looked at it, I realized just above the satin stitches, I realized it's all even and straight. So who says it wasn't supposed to be like that, right? So let's go over to the desk and we're going to finish up. So all we need is to unhoop the whole thing, and we are going to trim it up very carefully, and we're going to make it look really good. And so I have fabric and I have cutaway on the back of the block, and then I have more fabric and I have more cutaway. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the edges, and take your time on this. The idea is that you cut it as close as you can to the satin stitches. Now I'm not cutting through the white, I'm cutting through that whole block that I was fixing. So I have my Ginger scissors. They're really sharp, and you want to be careful to cut it as close as you can without cutting the satin stitches, because you don't want to have to do them again. So you could do this, you know, before you put the satin stitch, but I thought that idea was a little scary. You might be able to make it a little more perfect and cut all those edges in, but I was quite content with this. So I wanted to try different ways of cutting out the back, and I thought, wouldn't this be easier like this to cut it? I could make a faster cut and a better cut, and the answer on that is a big no. Big no. Why? Because, yeah, I cut the white fabric just a little bit. I could feel that it was different, and, you know, one little cut, you can ruin your whole thing. I did cut it through a little bit, but it's not too bad, so, which is great. So it's pretty good. You can also very carefully take a Sharpie marker and touch up anything that you need if you feel like you need to do that. I trim it up. I could spend a lot more time on it. But, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Basically, too, remember there's an awning that goes on the top of this. So anything at the top and probably half of the sides aren't going to show because we put an awning over it. So this way of trimming it works for me. Most of it is pretty well done. Not too bad. There's a few spots because I'm cutting through so much and not cutting the background fabric. A little bit tricky, but you know what? Practice your trimming skills. If you're more comfortable with applique scissors, they would work too. I just felt it was kind of thick, so I didn't want to do it. But look at that. I've got a whole new block. I couldn't believe it. Yes, that was easy to do. Now I do have some little pieces here and there, and if you really, really wanted to improve it, you can take your little sharp scissors. Now I keep them right on my Luminaire. They're little tiny, sharp, pointy ones, and you could trim some of it off if you wanted to, but just super careful. Sometimes when you want to fix something up so it looks perfect, you end up over cutting it, and getting into the satin stitches, and that's going to kind of make a mess. And we don't want to do that. So carefully, carefully. These are the parts, like I said, that you could use very carefully and holding it kind of like I am. You could do the edges with a black Sharpie pen, and that would really crisp up the edges and look great. So far I absolutely love my Luminaire 2. It does a lot of cool things. There are a lot of things that are different from McDreamy, who is my dream machine too. Lots of bells and whistles, lots of, extra things you can do. But this is one of my favorite things. Now, the projector is really cool, but this scanning camera is faster and better, and you get a better picture. So remember that I precision placed running stitches on a quilt block that was already stitched. And I'm pretty darn impressed with that. I really like that. I don't think I ever did that on my dream machine too, but the Luminaire 2 just makes it easy and fun. Absolutely fun. So you could do this with applique as well, create it, fit it on something that's already stitched, I mean, and fit it on and it'll work perfectly. So I can think of at least a million ideas for that function, the camera. It's super handy. So I hope you guys like this little video. I'm really happy to get my quilt block back. I still have to make the awning, but I will put up pictures of it afterwards. It's nice to be able to fix it. I could start it all over again, but I don't actually have the pink and the green fabric, and I wouldn't want to try that pumpkin again because he is just so perfect and cheesy right in the door. So experiment with your machines. If you have a camera, here's a really good reason why you should use it. Now look at that. Isn't that wonderful? So I took a half finished block and made a finished one. Thanks guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.